Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Friday morning, talking tonight's 9 game slate around the association. Before we dig in, don't forget, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way, you will be notified whenever I post a new video. You definitely do not want to miss out on those breakdowns. Sorry about yesterday, had some technical difficulties, but that did not stop us in the Discord from having a very good night. One user actually shared first place in a FanDuel tournament for just over $50,000. So pretty good night there. But yeah, that pretty much covers it. Again, if you have not signed up already for my content package, which includes Discord projections, daily breakdowns, game tape breakdowns, and all kinds of cool stuff, make sure you hit that follow button on Twitter and DM me to find out how you can sign up for a very affordable price. But without further ado, let's dig into this slate. Let's start with the very first game of the night. Charlotte at Orlando. 217 over under. Charlotte favored by 2 in this one. Very interesting game to talk about. Obviously, we have Steve Clifford making his return against his former team. Clifford coached for the Hornets for the past 5 seasons, but got fired last year. Um, Obviously, Orlando fell short in their first game to the Hornets. Sorry, the Hornets fell short in their first game to the Bucks, but Kemba Walker actually had a fantastic outing in that one. 41 points from Walker. The Magic looked pretty decent against the Heat in their opening game. One thing to note was that Mo Bamba and Nikola Vucevic pretty much split minutes, which was interesting to see. Both played right around in the mid 20s. I kind of expect that trend to continue, which is a little frustrating, especially on a night like tonight, whenever you have Orlando taking on Charlotte, who has struggled on the boards. I think both of these guys, especially in tournaments, are very, very viable. Over here on DraftKings, you have Vucevic at 7,500. You have Mo Bamba at 4,700. Bamba definitely someone to consider in tournaments. Looked really good in that first game. Um, I'm definitely leaning Bamba in this spot here. 4,800 on FanDuel. Obviously, we see he put up 27 fantasy points. Like I said, very good outing from him. 13.7 rebounds, a couple blocks in that outing. But where I'm really looking at on this Orlando side of this game is going to be Evan Fournier. 6K on FanDuel. He is 5,200 over here on DraftKings. Way too cheap over on DraftKings at that price. Charlotte, a team that they struggled against wing players last season, but they also struggled against guys that could shoot the corner threes above the break threes, which is something that Evan Fournier pretty good at. And he actually had some really good numbers in that first game. Led the team in usage, 29.5%, put up 15 shots. 40% of his shots last season came from three, which again bodes well against a Charlotte team that struggles to defend the 3-point line. So I actually really like Evan Fournier. Like I said, on DraftKings, just way too cheap. You can obviously go with Aaron Gordon, who also looked outstanding in that first game. Very good spot for him. Again, someone that can rebound against a team that has struggled. Gordon, 26 points, 16 rebounds on Wednesday. Shot 4 of 6 from beyond the arc. If that three-pointer is going to continue to fall for him, he has a massive ceiling. As we saw, he put up 50 fantasy points against Miami in that first game. So I do like him a decent amount here. Marvin Williams is a cheap punt. Go for it if you want, but I think there's better places to go. Kemba Walker obviously had a huge outing in that first game. I'm not buying into 100% of this Kemba Walker massive usage, all this stuff, but someone that had some success against the Magic last season, averaged 24 points, 6.8 assists, 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 steals against them. Someone you can look at in tournaments. I think he's probably a better play on DraftKings, where he comes in just a little bit cheaper. Malik Monk, someone that you can consider here. Obviously, we saw him get 33 minutes. I don't expect him to get 33 minutes again tonight, but somewhere in the high 20s, a guy just with a lot of upside in this spot. And the bigs, I don't expect Charlotte to go small like they did last game. Obviously, we saw them go small with like Batum and MKG at the 5. Given that Orlando has two massive big men, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Charlotte to go small here. You can take shots on Cody Zeller and Willie Hernangomez. I expect them to bounce back in the spot. Both of these guys may be a little too pricey on FanDuel. I think there's one or two other guys that we're going to get to later in this cheap range that I think have similar upside for just a little bit cheaper. Moving on, we have the Knicks and Nets. Very highly anticipated outing in this one. 218.5 over under. Brooklyn favored by 3 in this game. Interesting injury report. We have Moutier is doubtful. That's going to help Trey Burke a lot. He was someone we liked in that first game. But we have Courtney Lee, who is questionable. Isaiah Hicks, who is questionable. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who is questionable. Alan Crabb, who is probable. Damari Carroll, Sauce Williams, and Shabazz Napier all out. The high-paced Knicks are going to be where I start my interest in this game, and that is Enes Kanter. I don't really see a whole lot of reason to get away from using Enes Kanter at your center position tonight. Dude just has massive ceiling. We saw in the preseason he dropped like a 20-20 on this team in very limited minutes. We saw him play about 27 against the Hawks. I would expect him to be somewhere around that range again tonight. 27 minutes of Enes Kanter against a Brooklyn team that cannot rebound, cannot keep anybody off the glass. Kanter has 20-20 upside again in this matchup at 7,400 on DraftKings. He is 75 on FanDuel. It's a pretty good expectation to think that he can get you about 40 plus fantasy points in this matchup. So I love Enes Kanter. He is going to be a core option for me tonight. Don't care what his ownership is going to be. I absolutely love him. The rest of the Knicks, though, it gets a little bit convoluted with how many guards they have. We saw Alonzo Trier actually put up a good game last time out. He only played 26 minutes. I do kind of expect the Knicks to try to give him some run while they still can before the G League season starts and he has to go down for his service time. He's really cheap on FanDuel at 3,900. He fits that bill as a guy that you can plug in as your punt option. You know, his score will get dropped if he's not any good. Over here on DraftKings, he is point guard eligible only, 3,400. I don't hate taking some shots on here. If he comes out and, gets you 20 plus minutes, can get you 20 fantasy points in the spot, he's someone that you can consider punting with. Trey Burke, as I mentioned, excellent spot for him. Again, the Nets, a team that really struggled to defend the pick and roll ball handler. I mentioned it last game with Trey Burke, but Burke was one of the better guys attacking that pick and roll last season, ranked in the 87, almost 88th percentile with a frequency of 43%. I definitely think we can go back to Trey Burke here if Emmanuel Moutier is indeed out. We saw him only play 20 minutes but put up 22 fantasy points. I would project him closer to maybe 24, 25 in the spot, a guy that can average over a fantasy point per minute, especially in a matchup like this. So he's someone that I am going back to the well on here. Outside of him, Tim Hardaway Jr., obviously we saw he had a massive game. If he's not shooting, 46, almost 50% from the floor, there is a somewhat unsafe floor with him. He is up to 7,300 on DraftKings. He is a little more affordable over here on FanDuel at 7K. I do absolutely love him in this fast-paced matchup. Again, someone that we can consider, and is probably going to be a little bit highly owned. So in tournaments, you could maybe pivot to someone else in that price range, but obviously a good option here. Ntilikina, where he's cheap, you can roll him out. Struggled offensively a little bit in that first game, but the defensive statistics are there for him. And yeah, that covers the Knicks. On the Nets side of things, LeVert led the team in usage at 31% last game. The return of Alan Crabb could put a little bit of a damper on LeVert, but LeVert just a guy, massive ceiling. 6,300 on DraftKings, really cheap. I do love him over there. He's a little less palatable on FanDuel, where he's more expensive, but this is a good spot for him here. We saw Dinwiddie post like a 31% usage rate last game. Played really well, still coming in at 5,500. I don't expect him to play 32 minutes, but we could see more of a split, like a 28 minutes, something like that. D'Angelo Russell only got 24 in that first game. I would expect Russell to come up a little bit and Dinwiddie to drop down just a little bit. But Dinwiddie, a guy you can definitely roll out. I think he's even cash viable given what he brings to this team. I'm not on the Joe Harris in this spot after a good game. Again, the return of Alan Crabb could put a damper on Joe Harris's minutes. And watch the news for Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Probably going to play limited minutes if he even suits up. Not someone I'm terribly intrigued in. Jared Allen in tournaments, again, we saw him put up a good game against the Pistons, but I have a hard time, especially on a site like FanDuel, getting away from Enes Kanter here tonight. Moving on, we have Cleveland at Minnesota. Minnesota, 8.5-point favorite. 223.5 over under. We saw Jimmy Butler just tear up the Spurs, and he's probably going to do the same thing to the Cavaliers tonight. Jimmy Butler, 8,100 on DraftKings, and let's pull him up over here on FanDuel, 9,500. That is a tough number to stomach, but at 9,500, he still has 45, 50 plus fantasy point floor. And I absolutely love him in this spot. 8,100, really tough to get away from him here. He's going to be a core option for me tonight. Not intrigued too much by the rest of this Timberwolves offense. I don't expect Jeff Teague to just go bananas like he did last game. I think some of that had to do with Karl Anthony Towns actually struggling and playing some limited minutes. We saw him only play 22 minutes, got in some foul trouble. Towns 10-1, not somewhere I'm looking on FanDuel, but over here at 9,100 on DraftKings is a decent tournament option in a fantastic matchup. You can go with Teague, again, 6,400, more of a cash option, I believe. In this spot, I don't see a ton of upside. I know he put up almost 40 fantasy points, but more of a cash option from the Timberwolves there. Flipping over to the Cleveland side of things, what a mess things are in Cleveland. This team is very interesting. Obviously, we have the Kevin Love revenge, and he did not play very well against Toronto, was something that I kind of expected, but still put up 21 points, but shot 5 of 18 from the floor. Was very apologetic to the team whenever that happened. That's encouraging because I think he's going to come out and want to put up a big game against the Timberwolves. Against his former team. We know the usage is going to be there for him. Very tough to get away from him at that 8K price tag on DraftKings, 8K on FanDuel. Again, very tough to get away from him in this spot. I do love using like Kevin Love and Jimmy Butler together. Chetty Osman, did not expect him to put up a massive outing in a very tough defensive matchup against the Raptors, but he did. And I absolutely love him in this spot. 6,200, a little pricey over here on FanDuel, but if you look on DraftKings, he is 5,400. Very good option here on DraftKings. And I did overlook Andrew Wiggins. Revenge game. I'll just leave it at that. Not too terribly intrigued by Andrew Wiggins on any given night. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I guess if you want to take a look at George Hill at 5K, the minutes should be there for him. 5K on DraftKings, very very affordable for a guy that has some defensive upside here. 5,700 FanDuel, I'm probably looking elsewhere, but that 5K mark on DraftKings is pretty appealing. Moving on, Boston at Toronto, 207 over under. Toronto -3. I don't have a ton of interest in this game. I think there's just better places we can look tonight. There are a couple guys that are a little bit underpriced, especially if you look at like Kyrie Irving on DraftKings at 6,600. Came out a little bit flat in that last game. Maybe a joke about his flat earth stuff, but 6,600 in tournaments, that's a very fair price. I don't hate taking some shots on him at that price tag. The rest of the Celtics, though, I think I'm just going to be looking elsewhere. You can go with Morris, who did not come up in price after putting up a massive game. He actually looked decent against this Toronto team last season, especially later on. But I think you can make a case to roll him out if you really want to. Yeah, 4,400 for his roll off the bench is a little bit too cheap. FanDuel, 4,500. You can definitely continue to look there. Kawhi Leonard 9,400 on FanDuel, a little too pricey. 8,500. I still prefer Jimmy Butler in that same price range, but Leonard in tournaments gonna go overlooked. And if you want to continue to ride the Jason Tatum train, you can. Just a little bit too pricey, and I think there's better spots to go tonight. Moving on, Sacramento, New Orleans. Oh, this one should be fun. We have Dave Yeager and whatever rotations he wants to roll out, and taking on the super fast-paced New Orleans Pelicans. A couple things that stood out to me in that first Kings game was how Willie Cauley-Stein played. Looked really, really good. 23 points on 10 of 15 shooting, collected 7 rebounds against Rudy Gobert. That's pretty intriguing, especially tonight. He comes in at like 6,300 on DraftKings. Very affordable over there. He is 7,500 on FanDuel. I'm still leaning Enes Kanter in that spot, but over on DraftKings, very good like tournament option if you're wanting to go with the two center lineup. De'Aaron Fox looked really, really, really good in that first game. We saw him play almost 40 minutes, 21 points in a very fast-paced matchup against the Pelicans. I like Fox in tournaments. Price is a little scary, but I actually think you can roll him out in tournaments. Might even be cash viable if we do get some notification out of Dave Yeager that those 37 minutes are gonna be fairly secure for him. Unfortunately, I think what's going to end up happening is if Fox struggles, he gets pulled. Unfortunately, we don't know if Fox is going to struggle in this spot, but I do like him a lot here in tournaments. The rest of this team, though, it's tough to trust these guys. We saw Buddy Buckets with a very high usage rate in that first game. Looked pretty good. Only played like 20 or 31 minutes, put up almost 30 fantasy points. It is a revenge game for Buddy Buckets. So if you're building a narrative team, there you go. Farrell, a cheap option in GPPs, has upside. It's just a matter if he gets the run, but this is a spot where they could deploy him a little bit more because he does have some defensive ability. And Nemanja Bjelica, we saw him put up a very, very good game last time out. 5K on FanDuel, played almost 30 minutes, 18 points, 8 rebounds, almost had that double-double. Someone that you can actually consider. I think he's fairly safe in this spot against a Pelicans team that we saw at times struggle against, wing forwards, guys that can stretch the floor, and guys that can like spot up. We saw PJ Tucker put up a decent game against the Pelicans that first time out. Bjelica is someone that can do some of the same things that PJ Tucker does on the offensive end. So I like Bjelica as a way to get cheap exposure to this game. Pelicans, Anthony Davis. Yeah. Um, Elfrid Payton, interestingly enough, did not come up too much in price after dropping a triple double. Um, I mean, it was a lazy triple double, 10, 10, and 10, but this is a guy that he has a triple double um, upside every single night. And in a matchup against the Kings, he has potential to put up a solid game here. Again, this is going to be a very fast paced game, I think. Pelicans going to try to enforce their pace will on the Kings. I think Peyton and Cash is viable. He kind of thrives in matchups like this. Kings did struggle against 3-point shooters, which makes Mirotic extremely interesting. We saw him just bomb from deep last game out, hit 6 of 8 of his 3-point attempts, put up 30 points, 10 rebounds. He is a very good option here. Julius Randle dealing with some plantar fasciitis. He is listed as probable, but I would make sure to keep an eye on any Pelicans news. That's not something you really want to mess with as any kind of athlete. Plantar fasciitis is not an easy thing to deal with. So if Randle somehow misses this game, that's going to boost Mirotic a significant amount. But if Randle plays, I mean, 25 points, 8 rebounds in that first game, he is a cheaper way to get exposure to like the upside here. Like Randle and Mirotic at that 7K price range, both of these guys can blow that out of the water in this spot. And then, of course, Drew Holiday as someone else that you can consider. I did skip over, I skipped over the Memphis and Hawks game. Shucks. This one going to be a barn burner. 209.5 over under. Memphis 7.5 point favorites. We have Dedmon, Collins, Hamilton, Anderson all out. Amari Spellman is doubtful. JaMychal Green is probable. Memphis looked really bad in that first game. They shot 29.8% from the field, gave up 57 rebounds to the Indiana Pacers. That's interesting. If they're going to continue to struggle on the boards, Alex Len, who did not have the game that I expected him to in that first outing, 21 minutes. Some of that had to do with getting blown out by the Knicks. With no Spellman, no Dedmon, Alex Len's minutes, as long as he stays out of foul trouble, a little more secure. He is a fantastic tournament option in the spots. We saw him average, as you can see, almost 24 fantasy points in 24 minutes against the Grizzlies in 4 games last season. Again, if the Grizzlies are going to struggle on the boards, that makes Alex Len someone that you can definitely target here. Taurean Prince is fine in all formats. Trae Young did not look great in that first game, but someone that you can consider in GPPs. He still has plenty of upside. Mike Conley looked good in that first game, given how bad the Grizzlies as a whole look. Should kind of have a field day running Trae Young into pick and rolls and whatnot. So I like Conley in tournaments in a matchup that should play a little bit faster than what Memphis usually does. So Conley is someone that you can look at. The one guy that I think I have the most interest in, and he's a value option, is Garrett Temple. Looked really good in that first game. And Temple's a guy that I've always kind of had, interest in on whenever he was getting minutes. Led the team in usage at 25.5% last game. That's not going to continue, but put up 13 field goal attempts in 24.5 minutes. Has some defensive ability. He is a very, very good value option in this spot, especially if he's going to try to bomb from 3, which is something that the Hawks struggled to defend last season. So I like Garrett Temple, especially if you just want to punch shooting guard here on FanDuel. You can plug in 2 of these cheap guys, Temple and Trier. One of them, if they don't put up 20 plus fantasy points or something, probably going to get that score drop. So very good strategy, I think, they're at least looking at it early on this morning. JaMychal Green probably needing about 25 minutes. Jaren Jackson Jr. probably going to get 23, 24 minutes. Green, someone that you can consider in this mid price tier in a good matchup, should be able to grab some extra boards tonight. So especially over here on DraftKings at 4,700, definitely a viable option there. So that covers that game. Let's move on to Indiana and Milwaukee. We have the Giannis Antetokounmpos taking on the Victor Oladipos. Some interesting things to consider in this game. Obviously, we saw Indiana out rebound Memphis 57-28. Milwaukee, not a team that was great on the boards last season, or Indiana, not a team that was great on the boards last season, but looks like Miles Turner and Sabonis are dedicated to being better on the glass, which could bode well against a Milwaukee team that struggled on the boards, has struggled for years on the boards. Milwaukee did, look decent in their win over Charlotte, but they did let Charlotte shoot 42% from beyond the arc, almost 45% from the floor overall. So that's a little bit interesting when we consider some of the options from this game. I expect that the Pacers and Bucks will go small in this game, and that makes Miles Turner someone that I don't have any interest in. Makes Brook Lopez at least interesting. You expect him to get a little over 20 minutes potentially, but if they go small, look for Ersan Ilyasova to get a decent amount of run here. We saw him look really good in that first game. He played right around 20, almost 30 minutes. I don't expect 30, but high 20s, potentially, maybe getting right to that 30-minute mark could happen in a very positive rebounding matchup for Ersan. Very cheap option here to consider. Obviously, we know Giannis, fantastic option. He's kind of 1A, 1B, I guess, to Anthony Davis if you're paying up. Will be tough, I think, to get both of them in on FanDuel, but you can definitely try, and that is a very viable strategy here. Chris Middleton, a guy that I think I'm going to have a lot of interest in against a Pacers team that did struggle at times to defend some spot-up shooters. He is someone that you can get some exposure to in this game. One of my favorite options in that like mid 7K range. Over here on DraftKings, I think I like him a little bit more than Oladipo. We know the minutes and the usage are going to be there for both of those guys, but Middleton coming in at a little bit cheaper price in a pretty good spot here tonight. Darren Collison, 4,800, 4,600. I think I'm using him as a core option here. Did not look great in that first game. 1 rebound, 5 assists, played 21 minutes again. This was a blowout against Memphis. Not a fantastic matchup for Collison in the first place. I expect him to get closer to that 28-minute mark tonight in a better matchup for him. He can stretch out to the 3-point line. Milwaukee struggled to defend the 3-point line last season. Collison was a guy that actually targeted against Milwaukee in all those in their games last year, and he did not really disappoint. He averaged almost 30 fantasy points against them in 2 outings. I like him here. 4,800, 4,600 on FanDuel. He is a guy that I'm going to have, unfortunately, a lot of exposure to. I mentioned the Pacers and Bucks both going small. Sabonis, a little bit expensive, 5,900, but he has upside against a Milwaukee team that really struggled to rebound. Going to play probably 24, 26 minutes. He can definitely get on top of that $5,900 salary on DraftKings. I'm not going there on 5,600, yeah, definitely, especially power forward. I thought he was going to be center eligible over here on FanDuel, but 5,600, he can get on top of that salary. I think in tournaments, a very good way to go. I loved Bojan Bogdanovic in that last game. Somewhat disappointed. Definitely a cash value at 4,500 on FanDuel. Someone that can hit from three against a Milwaukee team that struggled to defend the 3-point line. Keep an eye on Thaddeus Young. He's someone that I do expect to get a decent amount of run in this spot. And if the Pacers do go small, which they had a tendency to do against the Bucks last season, Thaddeus Young playing some minutes at the 5 could bode very well for him at 5K. He is someone that I might have some cash interest in if no mid-range value opens up tonight. Heading to Golden State's at the Utah Jazz. Shockingly enough, this game, I don't have a ton of interest in the Warriors. Obviously, we know that Utah very, very good defensively. Don't expect them to struggle like they did against the Kings. I think they just underestimated what Sacramento was going to be able to do against them. Guys like Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, all excellent tournament options. If I was forced to choose someone from this game from the Golden State side that I like the most, it would be Steph Curry, just given that he can do so much for this team. But at their prices, like, I think there's just better places to look than those guys. But in tournaments, feel free to use any of them. Kevon Looney, Damian Jones, guys that are probably going to garner some talk tonight. It's site specific. Looney would be the guy that I would look at on FanDuel in GPPs. Jones would be the guy that I would look at on DraftKings in GPPs, just given where their prices are. We saw Looney come up to 4,100 on FanDuel. Power forward eligible, so I like him a little bit more there. But at Jones, 4,600, not somewhere I want to go at center. But again, Jones on DraftKings, 3,800, somewhere that you can definitely consider. On the Utah side of things, Donovan Mitchell, one of the best cash options any given night, has a 30-point fantasy floor, which is really solid. I like him a decent amount here, and he comes into a little bit of strategy that we're going to talk about whenever we get to this next game. I think Mitchell is a pivot off of someone that's in the next game that we're going to talk about that has some risk associated with him. I like Mitchell in this matchup. It is a very good spot for him. Ricky Rubio, solid tournament option, especially in that mid-range. 6,300, did not have a very good outing in that first game, but I do like him a decent amount. Favors is a guy, if I'm wanting to get exposure to the Utah side of this game and I'm not using Donovan Mitchell, Favors is a guy that I think I have the most interest in. 6,100 over here on FanDuel. Played only 23 minutes, but he just has upside. I mean, we saw 31 fantasy points out of him, 18 and 9. I expect him to play a few more minutes, especially if this game goes small, which it does have it will do at one point. We saw him just, against pretty much the exact same Warriors team last season, 32 fantasy points in 24 minutes. He's a guy that can get on top of that $5,700 salary. I like Favors. He's might be one of my core options in this spot to get exposure to this game. Gobert is tournaments only just because they can go small and play him off the floor. Jay Crowder, expect him to get about 30 minutes in this matchup. Someone that can get on top of his $4,700 salary on FanDuel, $4,600 on DraftKings. You can definitely go there. I think he's even cash viable at that price. The Scranton Strangler, we saw him put up a very, very good game against the Kings last time out. Priced up to 6,300, but dude just went bananas. This is a good matchup for him as someone that can stretch the floor and hit from beyond the arc. Still going to play a lot of minutes. Can get on top of that 6K, mid 6K salary. So I like him on the wings here at small forward or shooting guard on DraftKings. Moving on, last game of the night, and this is where we get a little bit of strategy going. Oklahoma City taking on the Clippers. And where the strategy comes in is, what do we do with Dennis Schroeder? Russell Westbrook has been ruled out, but according to Clippers coach Doc Rivers, He has inside sources that Russell Westbrook is going to play tonight. The biggest downside is if we do not get news that Russ is going to be for sure out before lock, have to consider what you want to do with Dennis Schroeder at his price tag. $7,700 on DraftKings. He's still, for whatever darn reason, shooting guard eligible on FanDuel because, well, it's FanDuel. He had a good game against the Warriors. Obviously, we know he has upside. But if there's even a slight chance that Russell plays in the spot, I'm inclined to fade him on FanDuel. It comes down to your own, I guess, how much you can stomach the risk. Because if Russ comes in and does play 20 minutes, Schroeder's upside is way too low at that 7K price tag. Where it gets interesting is over here on DraftKings. What you can do is you can put Schroeder in that guard or that utility spot, leave yourself $100 salary, and if we do get word that Russell Westbrook is going to play limited minutes, all you got to do is flip Schroeder for Mitchell, and you are golden. Now, if you don't even want to consider that at all, and you don't want to take any risk at all with Schroeder, and you don't want to use Donovan Mitchell in here, I think you can fade Schroeder at his price tag on DraftKings. Again, in tournaments, you can take shots on him all that you want. I don't think Westbrook playing is going to hurt Paul George. He's still going to have a very high usage rate, 8,700 in a decent matchup. 92, again, 40 plus fantasy point floor, has the steals upside, can get you, a double-double easily. So Paul George still a guy that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to. So I do like going there. The rest of the Oklahoma City, Steven Adams is definitely interesting. We saw him put up a massive game against the Warriors. The Clippers were out-rebounded 56-47 by the Nuggets in that first game. If they're going to struggle on the glass, Adams has double-double upside, of course, in this matchup. I'm not going there on FanDuel just because I can get Enes Kanter for pretty much the same price. But on DraftKings, again, going 6,900 with Steven Adams and maybe plugging Adams and Kanter in as your two centers, pretty safe options there, I think, in this spot. We saw Boban get some run against the Nuggets last time out on FanDuel. 4K if you want to take that risk. Absolutely love punting center with Boban, a guy that has 25, 30 fantasy point upside, even if only plays 15, 20 minutes. And on DraftKings at 3,900, I think you can take a shot if you really, really want to in tournaments. As far as the Patterson, Jeremy Grant thing goes, I like Grant a little bit more here on DraftKings at 4,700 than I do like Patterson. But over here on FanDuel, where Patterson is $1,200 cheaper, I think Patterson can still be used as one of your punt options if you are inclined to do so. And on the flip side, Tobias Harris, we saw him play almost 40 minutes. Actually, he did hit 40 minutes, I believe, in that first game. Yeah, hit 40 minutes against the Nuggets. Plenty of upside here. He's the guy that I have the most interest in, but I still like Gallinari a decent amount. This is going to be, again, I mentioned it on that last pod, a very egalitarian offense. These guys, minutes are going to be kind of in flux at times this season. There's going to just be a lot of passing and ball sharing, but Harris, has double-double upside. We saw him put up 19-10 with 3 block shots against the Nuggets. This is a decent spot for him. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we saw him look really good in that first game. Played almost 30 minutes, which was a little bit surprising. He's a value option in this spot, I think. I don't have him projected for that 28 minutes. I think I have him closer to 24, 25. But he can get on top of that $4,500 salary on FanDuel, and definitely get on top of that $3,800 salary on DraftKings. So a punt option for you to go to there tonight. Not looking really anywhere else from this game. Lou Williams still a little bit too expensive. Again, I do like Gallinari here in tournaments, and not going with Gortat or Harrell. Not even going to look at Nerlens Noel in this spot, even though there will be spots, I think, where we can still roll Noel later on in this season. But that's going to do it for tonight's slates. Some interesting strategy to consider whenever we're looking, especially at that Oklahoma City Clippers game. So make sure you're paying attention to the news. Some things could definitely go your way if you fade Schroeder and Westbrook does play. But again, that's going to do it for tonight. Good luck in all your contests.